gloves for Cooro from Anima. He's got long fingerless gloves. I'm just going to start by measuring the circumference of my hand all the way around where I want the glove to stop. And just recording the average. And then I'll measure up at the top of my arm where I want the glove to stop. Okay, I have a burgundy fabric that I got. It's actually just a bed sheet for his gloves. It's approximately the color. So all I have to do is now just figure out a pattern from my measurements, basically making a long tube. Okay, so for the actual making of this tube-like thing, which will eventually look like a glove, I've just measured out I put my measurements on the cloth plus seam allowance, and I first did the small one, so where the hand would be. I found the center and I marked it there as well. Then from that center line or center dot, I'm going to just make a line down with the length of my arm from the 2 points where I measured the circumference of. There's my points. Then from the center of this one, so that I don't get a lopsided look to my glove, I'm going to just measure from the middle, I suppose, just kind of divide the measurement from around the top of my arm in half and start from the dot in that half point. And mark both sides of the tape. And then just to be sure, I'm going to measure this middle point again. So boring watching me. Just to make sure that I don't have the wrong size here. And then if I do just mark it at a different point. Okay, so from here I'm going to get a ruler and just measure out this big block, make sure that I have the right measurements, check them all, and start to cut it out. Okay, I got one. Got this kind of parallelogram shape, hopefully it turns out. And now I need the second one. I'm just going to use the first one as the template and do the exact same thing all over again. Okay, so I finished both my pieces. I pinned one of them together to just try it on, slide it on my arm and see how the size was. It was good, so I took the other one, and this here is the small edge where my hand will be, and this is the wrong side, so I'm just doing the little hem here. So I have my little measuring stick thing with it set on 1/4 inch for measuring it all along, and I'll just fold it and pin it as I go, using this to measure properly. Okay, so I did the top here where my hand is going to be. I measured out that seam. For the part where close to my shoulder, I'm going to put an elastic in the seam just to keep it from sliding down my arm, because that would be a serious issue. So just again, I'm going to take the circumference of my arm, measure that, and I'm going to add 1/2 inch, whole inch, just for in case I have excess arm, because we all get that often, especially when we're sewing. Okay, so this is just a little bit under 1/4 inch. This is 1/2 inch. So I think what I'm just going to do is basically I'm just going to do the same thing as the top here, and just fold it over the 1/2 inch, because now it's 1/2 inch and it's not a 1/4 inch anymore. And just like set this in sort of centered. And pin it right in with the seam. And what I'll do is I'll just sew it right into the seam as if it were the seam. And then I'll, when I put it together, I'll figure out what to do after that. Okay. Alright, now that I got that, I'll just smooth it out, iron it perhaps, so that it stays nice and flat, and do the other one. And then we'll move on to sewing. I'm not going to video myself sewing much because I'm pretty much just sewing straight lines, and if you're making this yourself, it's not going to be a really big help knowing how to push a pedal on a sewing machine. So, okay, now that I've kind of figured out what I'm doing, basically I think what I'm just going to do is, on this side, I pinned it and tried on. It's pretty good for how tight it is. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew it a little tighter here versus the rest. So
now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pin it all together, pin the sides together with the sides that I want nice together, so the wrong side's out, and it leaves kind of a twisted look, as you can see, but that's all fine and good because it turns into a tube after when you put it on. And so once I pin this, I'm just going to sew it and then try it on, I suppose. And for this, I have to think though, cause like there is a thumb hole, so I'm going to leave it on the seam, probably about 2 inches down. So I'm just going to sew up to 2 inches on here, and then just stop back stitch from there. And then I'm going to try it on and measure it to the size of my thumb, and then sew on there so I have a nice little hole afterwards. And then we'll figure out the seaming in there after we flip it right side out. I decided to leave the thumb just unseamed. The fabric that I have is good. If you don't have very good fabric, if you're doing this, then I suggest you just seam whatever there is to seam. But there you got it. A finished coral glove. If you want, he also, like, in some images he has a band around his wrist, like a rawhide band with stitches through it. If you want, you could also add that on. But for me, I'm not sure whether I'm adding feathers or not, so fine.